D.O.B. Mafia lanes and they shit chat.
I'm from Crenshaw Mafia, Gangsta Bloods, Ville Click, Notorious, you know, we Inglewood's most hated. My choice of weapon, already know, and I got that Glock, so I'm a pop all the time.
Westside CMG Gangsta Blood.
Like that.
If you've watched Boyz n the Hood, then you probably caught the references to the Crenshaw Mafia in a few scenes, especially this iconic one.
Everybody. I'm from Africa, I'm from Crenshaw Mafia.
But the truth is, the movie only gave a small glimpse into how ruthless and unhinged the Crenshaw Mafia really are. Let's get into it. So in case you didn't already know, Boyz n the Hood was actually filmed right in Crenshaw, and to keep it real and authentic, John Singleton brought in actual gang members to consult on the project. That added some raw truth to characters like Trey Styles and Doughboy. And here's something not many people know. Doughboy was inspired by Fatback from 107 Hoover, who just so happened to be one of Singleton's close childhood friends.
Who portrayed my role, my character, the original Doughboy. Now I'm gonna tell you, I'm a childhood friend of Johnson.
And then there's Ricky. His storyline and tragic ending were deeply tied to the gang tension that was boiling over during that time, including that unforgettable drive-by scene involving blood members. Now this is where things get even more interesting. A lot of fans believe that the Bloods depicted in the film were actually Crenshaw Mafia Gang, CMG. Why? Because the Crenshaw Mafia were directly referenced twice in the movie, and the whole film is set in Crenshaw, a neighborhood that CMG pretty much considers home turf. If that theory holds weight, then Boyz n the Hood barely even scratched the surface when it comes to how wild and feared this gang really is. See, Crenshaw Mafia are no small-time clique. They've been labeled one of the most hated and dangerous gangs in all of Inglewood. Their roots run deep, and their stronghold is a place called Darby Dixon.
I'm from Crenshaw Mafia, Gangsta Bloods, Ville Click, Notorious, you know, we Inglewood's most hated.
I'm baby, yes, from Crenshaw Mafia, blood, recognize the blood. You beat me not triple blood, getting you too.
Now Darby Dixon is a different beast. It's a struggling 6-block stretch in Inglewood, sitting just southeast of Sophie Stadium and the Hollywood Park Casino. The locals call it the Bottom because it's literally at the bottom of a sloped terrain, and symbolically, it's seen as being at the bottom in terms of living conditions too. Back in the 80s and 90s, around 1,500 Black and Latino residents called it home, but it was rough. We're talking gangs, drugs, crime, crumbling apartment buildings, barely any jobs, and non-stop noise from jets flying overhead since it sits directly beneath LAX's flight path. Darby Dixon was overcrowded to the point where you could find up to 20 people crammed into a single unit, but it also became one of CMG's long-standing strongholds. The gang was formed in the late 70s, originally branching off from the Inglewood family Bloods. Over time, they became tight allies with the Denver Lane Bloods, and together they formed what's known as the Mafia Lanes Alliance.
CMG is the hood that I claim. D.O.B. Mafia lanes and they shit chat.
For decades, CMG locked down the Bottoms like a military base. Their grip was so strong that they basically ran the whole area. You'd see them out in front of buildings, selling drugs in plain sight, getting into shootouts, gambling, blasting music, drinking, even urinating outside like they owned the streets. They weren't just thugs on corners either. CMG ran things with precision. They had tactics for keeping control, like trashing the cars and apartments of neighbors who dared to speak out, or letting pit bulls loose as their four-legged enforcers. They even had snipers on rooftops ready to shoot at rival gang members, or even the cops. Young kids riding around on bikes acted as lookouts, alerting the gang when police cruisers were rolling in. And the drug game? That was their bread and butter. It made them serious money, so much so that they were able to fund rap videos that weren't just flashy. They were practically cinematic street documentaries showing off the violence, the lifestyle, and the raw chaos they lived in every day.
Your favorite rapper? Sorry, not a real blood. Real music, I push it where the real is.
By 1985, the Darby Dixon neighborhood had fully transformed into one of the most notorious hotspots for rock cocaine in all of Los Angeles County. Nestled Nestled near the intersection of the 105 and 405 freeways, the area became a convenient stop for drug buyers, especially those who were too nervous to venture deeper into the more established dope zones in South Central. Instead, they rolled through Darby-Dixon, where the Crenshaw Mafia gang had set up a thriving open-air drug market. If you drove down Lawrence Street back then, it wasn't uncommon to see cars lined up like they were waiting for drive-through service, except they were there to cop crack. CMG members didn't even bother to hide it. They were posted on street corners in broad daylight, running their business like it was nothing. But once night hit, things got real. The area became a war zone. Gunshots were a regular part of the soundtrack, and neighbors had to duck and pray their homes wouldn't get hit in the crossfire.
If you old niggas is scary, if you gonna be over, you better have some heat. And if you not, you scared to carry a gun, nigga, hang your flag up, blood, and go get a job.
One of the most brutal nights in that era went down on October 21st, 1990. Around 11 p.m., 7 teenagers, all believed to be affiliated with the Crenshaw Mafia Bloods, were chilling on the corner of 104th and Crenshaw when a car crept by with its headlights off. The vehicle parked across the street, and then without warning, 2 Crips jumped out with assault rifles and lit the block up. Over 20 shots rang out, turning the corner into a bloodbath. Eric Malone, just 16 years old and a student at Morningside High School, was killed on the spot. Another 16-year-old, Eric Cole, died that same night at a nearby hospital. School officials later said both boys were working with counselors who were trying to help them escape gang life. Sadly, their futures were cut short. 2 more teens were hospitalized in stable condition, and another walked away with a minor wound. But the trauma hit the whole neighborhood hard, and even though that shooting shook the community, it was just one of many. Throughout the entire 1990s, the Bottoms stayed hot. Non-stop violence, gang beefs, retaliation, and innocent people caught in the middle. Things got so bad that in 1998, city officials had to step in with a permanent gang injunction targeting the Crenshaw Mafia specifically. This wasn't just a slap on the wrist, it came with strict conditions. No congregating in public, no being out after curfew, and no using cell phones, walkie-talkies, or even pagers in the open. It was basically a crackdown to try and dismantle their ability to operate as a unit. But even that didn't stop them. The violence kept going, and in 1999, just a year after the injunction, the violent crime in Darby-Dixon actually increased, reaching historic highs. And part of what triggered the city to even drop that injunction in the first place was a couple of particularly disturbing incidents. 1, the shooting of a 5-year-old boy, and 2, the savage beatdown of a pregnant woman. Both attacks were believed to be carried out by members of the Crenshaw Mafia. This wasn't just street-level crime anymore, it was full-on urban warfare. And CMG were beefing heavy with nearly every surrounding Crip set in the area. Their hatred ran deep. They even gave themselves the nickname Crab Murder Gang. And if you know anything about West Coast gang culture, you know calling a Crip a crab is the ultimate sign of disrespect.
I got to show what the crabs did. See, you know why that just happened right there, blood, when they came through?
What's that?
Because they was scared.
They were scared. That's all they can do.
That's all they can do.
The Crenshaw Mafia gang's long list of wars and rivalries took another violent turn in 2001, this time with the NHP, and it all kicked off after a young man named Christopher was tragically gunned down in what many believe was a case of mistaken identity. It happened on the night of September 27, 2001. Christopher was on his way to meet up with a girl near 104th Street and Crenshaw Boulevard. He had some handwritten directions with him, and while trying to follow them, he ended up making a wrong turn, right onto 104th Street and then onto 10th Avenue. The problem was, 10th Avenue is a one-way street deep in Crenshaw Mafia territory, and he was going the wrong way. Now, in that part of Inglewood, a wrong turn can cost you your life. As soon as he made it onto the block, a man standing at the end of the street spotted him, assumed he was a rival, and without asking questions, pulled out a 9mm and opened fire. Christopher was hit, but still managed to drive off, trying to escape. He made it a few blocks before crashing into a median on Crenshaw Boulevard. Unfortunately, the injuries were too severe. A bullet had struck his left side, and not long after, he passed away. Just 2 days later, on the morning of September 29th, Christopher's grieving mother and his 3 brothers, Brian, Tori, and Michael, decided to head down to the Bottoms, back to the scene of where their brother had been killed. While driving through 10th Avenue, the brothers spotted a group of what looked like gang members hanging around. Michael, still burning with anger and a need for answers, pointed at them, pretending like he had a gun in his hand, clearly trying to send a message or maybe stir something up. Later that night, friends and family had gathered at the house to mourn Christopher's death. The pain was still fresh. Michael, still not content with sitting around waiting for answers, decided to start doing some investigating of his own. That's when he got a mysterious call. It was a woman. She said her name was Nicole, and she told him she had some information about what happened to Christopher. She agreed to meet up with him later that night. Michael, his two brothers Brian and Tori, and their friend Floyd all piled into Michael's Mustang. First, they went out to grab something to eat, and then they started driving around, looking for the location where this Nicole was supposed to meet them. But whatever information she had would never be heard. Anyways, they were driving eastbound on Century Boulevard and pulled up to the intersection at Century and Doty. Floyd noticed something off. A burgundy Ford Contour had pulled up behind them and shifted to the lane on their left. Floyd glanced through the rear windshield and spotted a black male hanging out of the rear passenger window of the Contour. The guy was yelling something, but the group couldn't quite make out the words. Michael began rolling his window down, probably to hear what the guy was saying. But before they could react, the man in the Contour pulled out a gun and started firing. As the Contour slowly moved forward alongside the Mustang, shots rang out, multiple rounds. It was a targeted hit. Michael was shot in the head. His brother Tori took a bullet to the neck. The Contour peeled off, disappearing into the night. In a moment of chaos and desperation, Brian jumped from the back seat into the driver's seat, took control of the Mustang, and pulled it out of the line of traffic. He and Floyd then got out and tried flagging down other cars for help. When police finally arrived at the scene of the second shooting, it was pure chaos. Michael was slumped over in the driver's seat of his Mustang, unresponsive. He wasn't moving or speaking. His brother Tori had somehow made it out of the car and was lying in the street, wounded and bleeding. Despite everything, Tori was still conscious enough to answer a question. When an officer asked if he knew who was behind the shooting, he replied with one word: CMGs. He also mentioned a woman named Randy, saying she was somehow involved in the setup. Not long after, Brian and Floyd, who had initially fled to call for help, returned to the scene and gave their statements to police. Brian described the shooter as a light-skinned black man wearing a red sweatshirt, and he said the shooter was inside a red Ford, flanked by 3 women. By the time the dust settled, both Michael and Tori had succumbed to their injuries. In just 3 days, a mother had lost all 3 of her sons, Christopher, Michael, and Tori, to senseless gang violence. Later that night at the police station, both Brian and Floyd were shown a photo lineup. Without hesitation, they pointed out one of the faces, Craig. He wasn't just any random name. He was a known affiliate of the Crenshaw Mafia gang. Meanwhile, Craig was out that same night with his girlfriend, Taikisha. After linking up with her, Craig directed her to drive him over to the scene of the second shooting, the one where Michael and Tori were gunned down. As they pulled up and passed by the Mustang still sitting at the crime scene, Craig casually looked over and confessed, "Yeah, I did that ish. I pulled up next to that car and let them dudes have it." He also told her the reason he fired on Christopher's car a couple days earlier, because he saw it driving the wrong way down a one-way street. According to Craig, that's the kind of maneuver rival gangs used to pull before carrying out a drive-by, and in his mind, that made Christopher a target. Fast forward to May 2002, about 7 months after the shootings. By this time, Craig was behind bars, and his ex-girlfriend Taikisha had been placed under witness protection at a motel, the Beverly Garden Hotel, because she was expected to testify in an entirely different case. She was pregnant, about 7 months along, and her 3-year-old daughter was living with her too. Things were quiet until they weren't. Earlier that week, her assigned detective had given her a business card with an address printed on it, the location where she was supposed to be relocated permanently. On the evening of May 1st, Taikisha heard a knock at her motel door. A woman's voice called out, "Housekeeping." Thinking nothing of it, she opened the door. That's when hell broke loose. 4 people rushed in. Among them was Craig's brother, Duran, and 3 others. Taikisha was shoved onto the bed. Duran started questioning her immediately, pressing her about some money she was apparently supposed to send Craig while he was in jail. He also asked why she was in witness protection and whether she had been snitching. Taikisha denied it all, but Duran wasn't convinced. He grabbed a 9mm pistol, at first unloaded, and hit her across the head. Then in front of her, he loaded it. Things only got worse from there. They put a pillowcase over her head and began beating her viciously. She could hear Duran take a phone call and say, "Yeah, we found her. What you want me to do with her?" Then, even more chilling, he asked the caller, "Should we open her?" A phrase Taikisha understood to mean kill her. Next thing she knew, the phone was pressed against her ear. It was Craig on the line. She recognized his voice instantly. He asked her why she hadn't been putting money in his jail account. She told him she would if he just called off his people. Craig didn't give a clear answer. When Duron took the phone back, he said, "We'll just beat her up some more." And that's exactly what they did. The group grabbed the motel room telephone cord and tried to strangle her with it. Then they lit sticks on fire and began burning her, over and over. By the time they were done, Taikesha had been burned approximately 140 times. They didn't stop there. They raided her wallet, took her clothes, and left her bloodied and terrified. Before walking out, they warned her not to say a word about what happened and reminded her that they knew where her grandmother lived. While recovering in the hospital from her brutal injuries, Taikesha finally opened up to detectives. During one of the interviews, she told them something she had never mentioned before. Craig had personally admitted to her that he was responsible for the murders of the three brothers. That confession was a game changer. Eventually, Craig Armstrong was put on trial. The outcome was serious. He was found guilty on 3 counts of first-degree murder, but it didn't stop there. He was also convicted for the premeditated attempted murder of Brian and Floyd. In total, the charges stacked up. Craig was hit with 5 more felony convictions, including one for torture that involved the infliction of great bodily harm, referring to the savage beating and burning of Taikesha. And here's the crazy part. Craig was actually out on bail when he committed all of these crimes. The jury didn't hold back. They returned a death penalty verdict for each of the 3 murders, bringing some level of justice to a case that had shaken the community to its core. As for the Darby-Dixon neighborhood, things have changed over the years. It's still a struggling low-income area, but the extreme violence that once defined the 1980s and 90s has cooled off a lot. Factors like shifting demographics and gentrification have contributed to that drop in crime. And while the Crenshaw Mafia blood still exists, their grip on the area isn't nearly as strong or visible as it used to be.